You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. This is Force 13 Live. We are tracking this hurricane right now. The National Hurricane Center have just updated, gone with 75-mile-an-hour winds for what is Hurricane Isaias right now. It's passing through the Bahamas, and the breaking news at the top of this hour is that a hurricane watch has been issued, along with a tropical storm warning for parts of Florida. Hurricane watch in effect from north of Deerfield Beach to the Volusia-Brevard County line, and a tropical storm warning for north of Ocean Reef to Sebastian Inlet and for Lake Okeechobee. The Bahamas, all of the Bahamas right now have hurricane warnings, and rightly so, because this is indeed a hurricane and is likely to intensify further over the coming days. It became a hurricane overnight, actually at the end of last night, shortly after we finished our stream, and now it's on its way towards the northwest. Actually slightly weaker than it was earlier. They went with 80 miles per hour, now it's down to 75. My name's Nathan Foy. As always, I'm joined by our Discord team, consisting today of Ike, Wyatt, Kay, Rain, Strat, and Ryan Knack. Good afternoon and morning and evening all around the world, these people. Hello.
Hey.
Good morning.
Hey.
Of course, it is morning over there on the US East Coast, and let's start with the person who's closest to the storm right now, and that would be Wyatt. So you're watching this from northern Florida, I think it is, right?
Correct.
What have your observations been this morning and overnight? Are you surprised?
Oh, very much surprised. I did not anticipate it to, become a hurricane until later tonight, honestly. So I woke up, obviously, to it being a hurricane, and I'm like, well, now. And then, it's starting to, kind of get sheared and some dry air getting into the storm, obviously. It has been downgraded a little bit, but it's still barely hanging on to a hurricane right now. And as you can see on the screen right now, that is the potential wind swath for where tropical storm and hurricane force winds can go.
So the yellow's hurricane force there?
No, the red is hurricane.
Oh, the red.
Force. Yellow is going to be 50 knots.
Mm-hmm. So very close for comfort, as
Yes.
always seems to be the case when it comes to Florida these days.
Yes.
We're also joined by Strat. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
The forecast has shifted a little bit, but it's still calling for significant impacts along the northeastern part of the US, but no longer as a hurricane.
Yeah, and if it's going to have more land interaction further south, like the forecast shifting west, potentially showing a landfall along the Carolinas now and getting dangerously close to Florida, you would typically expect it to be a bit weaker as it moves up the coastline, just because it won't be over warmer waters to have the same opportunities to strengthen. But regardless, everyone along the eastern seaboard needs to continue to monitor the developments of the system very closely. Fortunately, it's weakened a little bit for the time being, but its future intensity is still quite unclear, although much more certain than last night at least. We can get a better grasp at saying that this probably will be at least a strong tropical storm or minimal hurricane as it approaches the eastern seaboard of the United States.
There's the latest cone right now, calling for a hurricane landfall around about the South Carolina-North Carolina border. We purposefully don't bring on the maps that have the center line in them, because that's not really what you should be looking at. The storm could still track anywhere within the cone, and that means it could make landfall very soon in southeastern Florida even, or at the other extreme, it could still stay out at sea all the way. Today we're also joined by Rain. How are you? Were we expecting Rain to speak? I'm not sure actually. We've also got Kay. Hello.
Hello.
And you're joining us from over here in the UK on the other side of the pond. But you've been watching this storm closely as well.
I have, and a feature that I've noticed recently, after the Shear first got pushed off to the northeast of the centre and it partially exploded for a time, there was a big blurb near the centre, and that appears to be now wrapping around. It's already been recovered by deepest convection in the storm, and it looks like it's re-intensifying.
So you mean to say it's rebounding now?
Yes, it might have briefly dropped to a tropical storm in between the last advisory and now. But definitely already back to a hurricane, and I reckon it would be back to its 70 knot initial peak by the next advisory, if not higher.
Today we're also joined by two of our members in Asia as well. We have Ike, who's getting a bit of a reputation of being the webcam guy. What are we looking at today?
We are looking at the 7 Stars Resort in Spa. The camera is currently looking at northwest.
Northwest. Where's that?
In Turks and Caicos Islands.
Oh, right, okay. So it is pointing towards the storm, roughly. Or somewhere near. It's a bit breezy and very overcast, as you can see. Interesting scene. We've also got Ryan Knack joining us from Singapore this evening. Or maybe early morning now. How are you?
And I'm good.
And do you feel the correlation when we've been talking about this storm in the last few days, how large it was initially, comparing it to a Western Pacific typhoon?
Yeah, surprisingly, it's quite large, especially in the northern periphery of the system.
Although it has now shrunk in size quite a bit, especially when you look at the National Hurricane Center wind field graphic, which regrettably I don't have right now, but it has shrunk in size by getting towards a half. And that's
spending about 5 years.
Mm-hmm. And that's mainly because I'd imagine the land interaction, which has potentially weakened the storm slightly, only for it to intensify again. And it's given it really a smaller core, especially after it moved over Hispaniola. And it's really helped out this storm, because the National Hurricane Center a few days ago were just calling for this to be a tropical storm at peak. And now all of a sudden you've got it calling for a high-end Category 1, albeit it's not a Category 2 peak forecast anymore as it was earlier this morning and overnight, but they're still calling for a significant hurricane the same strength as Hannah.
Yeah, and I think overall we can say it was quite surprising last night. A couple hours after we'd finished our live coverage, see reconnaissance aircraft go in around midnight and find a system like this, which had just reformed a center after the old one had capitulated while it moved over Hispaniola. Seeing this as a hurricane when it really just reformed its center after interacting with one of the most mountainous terrains in the whole Western Hemisphere, at least in the Atlantic Basin, for cyclones to track near or over. So definitely something very unexpected to see play out the way it did last night, and significant implications with that for the future intensity forecasts as well. As we've seen, they are a bit higher than we were looking at yesterday.
Here's the latest radar out of Miami, and as you can see, there's nothing, because 99% of the storm is out of range from Miami's radar, and this doesn't include the other ones over the Bahamas and whatnot, but the storm is down there, trust me. There's one or two slight little leading bands that are just about to head towards the Florida coastline now, and there was one coming through last night as well, I believe. The very, very peripherals are starting to arrive in southeastern Florida, or will do later today, already sweeping through the central and northern Bahamas. But shortly I'll be able to show you what the latest models are putting out, but at the moment, just to give you again that sense of where the storm actually is in the wider shot, there it is once more, and you can see there the part of the storm is over the southern Bahamas still, and that's about 400 miles from Miami. And as always, during this hour of coverage today, we'll be able to take your questions. We'll be doing more coverage tonight, but we thought we'd do this morning update for everyone. So start your message with Force 13 all in text. It will light up big and bright for us. There's the first one. Will this be the major hurricane that will hit Florida this year? Well,
I think the best way to really say that is after its stint of disorganization and weakening this morning, because it's going to be entering a bit more of an adverse environment in terms of wind shear in the next 1 to 2 days or so. That's probably increasingly unlikely compared to last night when we found out that this was already an 80-mile-an-hour hurricane at that time.
Yes, I would agree. I think major hurricanes are a lot less likely now than it might have been.
Yeah, considering the general, I mean, it's trying
I
to
don't
look
know
better.
though. You've still got the Gulf Stream.
That's true, but if it moves too far west and ends up having more land interaction with the east coast of the United States earlier, like some of the computer models are hinting at now, that would also inhibit its chances to really interact too much with the Gulf Stream in its more favorable environment in terms of shear when it starts to kick off to the north a bit. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword for the storm, because on one side, if it moves closer to land in Florida and portions of the southeastern United States, land impacts will obviously be worse for those areas in regards to the system, but it'll have a lesser chance to actually be over the warmer waters of the Gulf Stream when it's starting to kick up to the northeast and be in a more favorable shear environment, and that could actually limit intensification somewhat.
John Lemon says, does this look like Sandy on the 25th? Not really. Stop the Sandy comparisons, that's all I can tell you. Sandy was further east as well, wasn't it? No, it wasn't. It was further west. And then it jumped out towards the northeast a little bit, and then this storm will end up going further west through the northern Bahamas. And it's going to be a hell of a lot more tropical and smaller. Not that many comparisons to Sandy, believe it or not. What about impacts to the northeast? Now, Strat, you're up there. Has the feeling changed at all there since yesterday?
I haven't woken up too long ago, so I haven't been able to talk with people in the area yet, other than my own direct family that lives with me. I mean, overall, we're still doing the same thing as we have been, and because impacts up this far are still pretty unclear at this time, we have a general plan in place. We're going to make sure we have enough supplies, and we're going to get out tomorrow or on Sunday and get some more if it becomes really apparent that we're likely to see some significant impact from the system. I'd assume that's a general feel for most people around here, or they aren't even aware that the storm may be threatening land up here yet. But to anyone watching this right now that may be in the Northeast, I just strongly advise you, monitor the developments of the system very closely over the next 24 to 48 hours. At that point, potential impacts in the Northeast will be much more clear, and you'll be able to act on your plan that you may have in place. Although you should have a general plan in case of an impact kind of sketched out in your mind already for what you really think you should be able to do.
Here's a look at the models right now. First of all, let me point out that TCLP and TABS are statistical models and are pretty much no good. So it's not really going to go to the western part of Florida. It would be extremely unlikely. You're mainly following that model consensus, which is curving off towards the north and then northeast. And it is a close call as to whether the storm makes landfall in North Carolina and then whether it goes on to Delmarva Peninsula, whether it goes into Massachusetts. If you're going to give percentages based on that graphic, North Carolina would probably be about 60, maybe 65%. Massachusetts would probably be about 40%. Nova Scotia probably at about 30 to 40%. And that's without factoring in the intensity, but if it did make landfall in North Carolina, it will probably be at least a Category 1. That's certainly what's on the forecast anyway. Will the area of interest near Africa form? Well, we said last night that its chances were fading. It's now down to 20% last I checked. Have they put it down further? I'm not sure.
Still at 20 for the time
20%.
being, although that'll probably continue to fade out as we keep going on through the day.
Yeah, it's gone. What's the CDPS scale saying about it? Well, last night we were looking at CDPS Stage 3, and that was based on a 100-mile-an-hour storm through the central Bahamas, so I really can't see how whether it would have gone up there. I think it would have stayed at Stage 3.
Yeah, I think Devin had a little bit of messages about it. It's borderline 3 to 4 for the Bahamas right now
is
in
it?
general. Yeah.
Did he say that just now? Or?
That was last night after it became a hurricane. So, I mean, it doesn't change the key messages for the region at all, really. Just that, to keep in mind, this is a very dangerous storm for those that are directly in the path of it.
How bad will it be for New England?
I think it'll be significantly
I mean, it has the
significantly
possibility.
worse than Day was. So don't be comparing it to.
I mean, it's possible it can be quite significant for our region, but, again, we're in between days 4 to 5 with this cone right now, and that means it could be anywhere from well inland New York and up in Vermont to far enough out to sea to where we won't be seeing impacts at all in the Northeast, except for maybe parts of Cape Cod. So, again, impacts are probably more likely today than they were yesterday for the Northeast, but not definitive enough to really say for sure. So, again, at least for the next day or two, at most, until things become very clear or increasingly so. If you're in the Northeast, monitor the developments very closely and have a general hurricane plan in place in case it becomes apparent that impacts would be more likely in your location.
Chances of wind and rain in Orlando, 23% at the minute, according to the National Hurricane Center for tropical storm force winds. As for rainfall, I've not seen a huge amount on the forecast. But I imagine you'll be talking about, of course, if the storm did make landfall, you'll be looking in excess of 5 inches. National Hurricane Center are currently saying, they're currently saying 4 to 6 in a small area of eastern Florida.
Yeah, Orlando right now is 2 to 4 inches.
2 to 4.
2 to 4, yeah.
And also, North Carolina could get over 4 inches as well. Let's see what else we've got. Many questions about 93L. It's not up to much, so I know people are excited about potentially yet another Atlantic storm, but it's not going to be coming from this by the looks of things. Could the Shear weaken it and steer it west to Florida? A weaker storm is more likely to move further west.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, because there is quite a chance that the shear could continue on it, because it is now a highly sheared storm with the center possibly trying to get exposed a little bit, but the convection is still blowing up. So if it continues to get sheared and weaker, I mean, yes, there is a chance that it could kind of go into the Florida Peninsula. One of the models that does kind of show that is the CMC model. It does kind of have that going into Florida last time I checked as a really weak storm.
Okay, sounds like someone in the background there. Let's take a look now at what the models are saying, what the GFS model is saying at least, and I can show you on this graphic here. So quite clearly, there's the storm to begin with, and let's see as we move along the progression where it ends up going. So there it is now, becoming still it's a borderline hurricane at that point, passing very close to the capital of the Bahamas, Nassau, and Andros Island. And then it continues up there, so the hurricane at that point is very close to the coast of Florida. This is is it Saturday night? Saturday afternoon into the evening hours, it's looking like that. Over Saturday night there, it's continuing up the coast. It's still a borderline hurricane, starting towards the north and then northeast. And there it is, making landfall near the border between South and North Carolina. That is on the GFS model for Monday afternoon. Of course, it could be slightly different than what's been offered there by the GFS, and then it continues up there, still actually near hurricane force when it does reach New England. But it could change still at this point, but that is becoming an increasing likelihood. Elsewhere, you've got that other area, the one that the National Hurricane Center has tagged, the middle one. It's currently at 0%, I believe. They've got that there. You can see the tropical storm force winds. That could be a brief tropical storm. It won't affect land. And then further towards the east, way over here towards Africa, you've got this initial system, which some people were thinking it might have been a tropical cyclone. You can barely make out the center of it there, but that's that system, and it moves up towards the north. If it was going to form, it's got to be in the next 8 hours or so.
Well, given how good it looked earlier, it might become a post-season tropical depression.
That is indeed a possibility.
Yeah, although at least right now, if it wasn't marked already, which it wasn't, the odds will most likely continue to decline as it enters more and more dry air as it shifts further north. Fortunately, at least right now, it's small enough that any significant impacts from it are actually in between mainland West Africa and Cabo Verde, so they aren't actually seeing any major rainfall associated with the system right now, at least with 93L.
And to help us out a little bit more as well, we've got rain showing us the rain graphics. The yellows being the 4 to 6 inch area, so part of the coast of Florida included in that. A lot of the Bahamas are up above 6 inches. The areas that were worst affected by Dorian, it's likely that the storm will pass west of there, hopefully to the extent where they don't feel anything much. Can't guarantee that at all at the moment, I'm afraid. It will probably be tropical storm conditions at least, and some significant rainfall, but at least we're not looking at a 20-something feet storm surge. At the minute, I think we're talking 3 to 5, is it still?
That sounds about right, but I'll do a double check for you.
Let's see if we have any more comments. Well, other models, people want to see other models. I can't show that on my screen, but if anyone else wants to do that, you're more than welcome to. Is there an update every hour now? I assume you mean from the National Hurricane Center. I don't think they're doing that yet. I don't think they'll do that for a little while at the moment. What else do we have here? Oh yes, plenty of questions further about the Western Pacific as well. Now, in the Western Pacific, it's really been struggling. Let's just pop over there for a brief second. There is the Western Pacific right now, and what you can notice, quite interestingly, is a very large area of rotation, a potential tropical cyclone in the South China Sea. It's enormous, by the way. The JMA have tagged it as a depression, and it's got, well, on the universal clock, it's got 9 hours before the end of the month to become a tropical storm. Otherwise, we'll have our first stormless July in the Western Pacific since 1886. There's also another area of interest there east of the Philippines, continuing towards the northwest at the moment, likely to pass through the southernmost Ryukyu Islands as a borderline tropical storm. We'll see what goes on with that, but the main feature there is that enormous system in the South China Sea.
I checked, and it looks like the JWC, I think it's called. They tagged both of them as depressions.
Who? The JTWC?
Yeah. They tagged both of them as depressions. It looks like.
They're both at moderate chances. Last time I checked, the JMA, last I saw, have one of them as a depression, unless they've done both of them now.
Yeah, according to JTWC, neither of them are tropical depressions at this time. Both of them have a moderate chance of development, according to the JTWC, but no active tropical cyclones there yet.
All right, as we look back at the Atlantic-wide shot, and you'll notice still that most of the cloud coverage associated with Isaias is located over the Turks and Caicos Islands, the southernmost Bahamas. It will be reaching over the central Bahamas in the next couple of hours, we would think. Let's reiterate what warnings we've got in effect right now. There is a hurricane watch which was recently issued. That's in effect, but first of all, the hurricane warning in effect for all of the Bahamas. That's quite clear cut. Hurricane watch for north of Deerfield Beach to the Volusia-Brevard County line in Florida. A tropical storm warning for the Turks and Caicos Islands and north of Ocean Reef to Sebastian Inlet and Lake Okeechobee in Florida. From the National Hurricane Center, the hazards expected. Dominican Republic and northern Haiti are expecting 4 to 8 inches of rain with isolated maximums of 12. I think that's a total, not still to come. The Bahamas and Turks and Caicos 4 to 8 inches as well. Cuba 1 to 2 with isolated maximums of 4. And Florida, South Florida into East Central Florida 2 to 4 inches with isolated maximums of 6. That's Friday night through Monday. And that could result in
Hello?
isolated flash and urban flooding.
Hello.
Who's
I'm
that?
on audio now.
Oh, that's Rain.
Yep.
You've also been tracking the storm for a few days with us now, also up there in Connecticut. How do you feel about the northeast's chances at the moment?
Well, I feel a little better than I did yesterday, because yesterday it was obviously forecasted to become a hurricane, like low-end hurricane when it was coming up here, but now it seems like it'll be a little weaker than that. However, the cone does seem like it's going a little bit more for a direct hit rather than yesterday, although it's weaker. So yeah, I've been tracking it closely, but I think it'll probably be a little bit less impacts than we were expecting yesterday.
I mean, in short, the weaker storm would go west and a stronger storm would go east, so choose your poison, really.
Yeah, I think at that point we'd probably take the tropical storm. I mean, we went through Faye. It was like nothing up here, so I'd probably rather have it come to me.
It's a bit more than Faye, though.
Yeah, it'll probably be a bit more than Faye, although it'll be way quicker than Faye was.
True indeed. Let's see what else we have here. We're reading out all the comments, as many as we can, during this hour update, because that's the main reason we're here. People want to know about the recon. What are they up to?
Let's see if we can get the latest on that. We had some recon on the plane this morning. That was what we found out. The storm's a bit weaker. It is actually still in the system. It's coming for a pass from the northwest to southeast quadrant right now. We'll probably get that within 30 minutes at most, a full pass of the center of circulation, and see if this blow-up of convection over the center has actually been helping the storm potentially maintain its intensity, or trying to deepen again, or if it's still on a bit of a downward trend for the time being. So we'll make sure to get that to you guys as soon as that information's out.
And Ryan Knack here showing us the radar again. Looks to be the center of the storm down there. Yep, hovering over it. Trying to interpret its movement there, it would appear to be still northwest, following the forecast. But you can see where the heaviest of the weather is.
And someone asked, is there any chance of wind shear dying down? If you want the real honest answer, that the odds of wind shear decreasing substantially enough to where it would allow easy intensification of the system won't really be as present now until the storm makes a move towards the north and the northeast, so that its movement's better aligned with the direction of the upper level winds around it. The trough that's going to be kicking it off to the northeast, potentially riding up the U.S. East Coast, initially will be a potential inhibitor to the system as it moves through the Bahamas and approaches Florida generally northwestward, because of the differing directions of those upper level winds creates wind shear, can displace convection from the system and weaken it. So there's no real chance of upper level winds becoming extremely favorable or significantly more so than they are right now until its direction really begins to change to the northeast.
Could the east coast of Florida see hurricane force winds? Well, the obvious answer is yes, because there's a hurricane watch out there now. So certainly the National Hurricane Center acknowledging that there will be a chance of hurricane conditions. When they up it to a warning, then they expect that hurricane conditions will happen somewhere within that warning area. XCL says the National Hurricane Center indicated in their forecast discussion that Isaias had a 60% eye wall even though it weakened. If you got any input on that?
Yeah, well, it was only a temporary weakening, as I said earlier. It might have just barely got into tropical storm for a short period of time, but it had a very deep burst of convection near the centre, and it's managing to wrap that shear around the centre into the shear. So it's doing well to shield itself from the effects of shear. It wasn't well built initially to deal with it, but it's doing a lot better now.
If you want the exact quote, for clarification for that person from the National Hurricane Center's forecast discussion, it says, although some slight weakening has occurred, radar data from the aircraft and the Bahamas radar indicate about a 60% eye wall is formed in the northeastern semicircle, which is an indication that the cyclone is still trying to reorganize. And that's why they're actually still expecting some strengthening during the next day or two or so before it potentially encounters more hostile conditions as it really gets towards the maximum of wind shear as it gets towards the northern Bahamas for the time being.
Somebody asked, will rain or wind be the bigger impact with ECIs? I can't pronounce it right.
Probably.
Isaias, I mean, let's be honest, when we're talking about tropical cyclones, unless it's a very strong storm, and even with a system like this, in general, the wind should be the main concern only if you're near the very direct landfall zone. That's when very damaging sustained winds can become a more immediate concern to life and property. But overall, with cyclones, the main threat, and we should really talk about this as much as we can, is rainfall. 90% of deaths from tropical cyclones occur because of rainfall and flooding, not wind. That's only 10%.
Well, at the moment,
when you're looking at a system like this, still, rainfall is typically the main threat that you're looking for.
pretty much all the questions right now are about whether it's developing an eye or not, and when it might happen, when it will become visible. I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that.
Well, given it's got 60% eye wall, I would expect an eye to form within the next 12 hours. And then once it does that, you might have a better chance of strengthening even despite the shear.
If it is able to strengthen again, could we see a major hurricane or a brief Category 3?
I mean,
I don't think we can rule it out.
probably not.
I really don't think we
No.
can rule it out.
I
But
wouldn't think it would be a long.
but it's unlikely.
I'd probably
Yeah.
say if it did become a major, it would be extremely brief.
Don't underestimate these waters, though.
Yeah,
I mean, if it
30,
wants to
40 in
become-
some places.
If it were to want to become a major, it's going to have two chances. It would have to really ramp up unexpectedly fast in the next 24 hours now before it faces higher wind shear, and that would inhibit strengthening or cause some weakening. Or if it stays far enough to the east and doesn't make landfall along Florida, which is still a possibility, of course. The forecast cone, Florida's very close to a center point on some of those. It would have to stay far enough off to the east so that when it begins to move to the northeast and the shear lessens around the system, it'll be over warmer waters to the point where land interaction wouldn't inhibit potential intensification. So it's not really likely that it could become a major hurricane, but it's still technically possible.
Yeah. Something that's been sent in to our Discord server that Wyatt has up is flooding in the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Do we have that?
Is that from Wyatt?
Oh, there it is. Let me just get that up just a moment. So this is flooding. Did you say Turks and Caicos, that?
That's what I've been told.
Okay, so there's some significant flooding by the looks of things. At least a couple of feet deep. Do we know when that was? Is that today?
Yes, that's fairly recently.
So that's at least one insight into what's been occurring on those islands. Now, they weren't near the centre of the storm. They got a lot of rainfall from it, though. We can only assume that it is rainfall, and maybe it is storm surge. But I'd imagine it might be more rainfall. Let's see. Is anything happening in the Eastern Pacific right now? Well, I can tell you the answer is on your screen in a moment. Not really. There's very little going on there. So that's the Eastern Pacific discussed for the day. Let's go back to Hurricane Isaias right now. And if you've just joined us, the latest information is that it is a hurricane. It has been a hurricane all morning. It's down slightly to 75 miles per hour. And the forecast is for it to sweep round the eastern coast of the United States, curve towards the northeast, past the Outer Banks, and towards New England. Looking at the National Hurricane Center's latest forecast there, you can see that it will peak as a Category 1, according to them. They earlier said in the forecast that it would peak as a minimal Category 2. Either way, it's still on the borderline. What's also on the borderline is the storm's track. Currently, as it stands right now, if the storm was to deviate west by just a couple dozen miles, you'd be looking at hurricane force conditions along the coast of Florida, and as such, a hurricane watch has been issued. And then later on the track forecast there, Monday, we're thinking that it could be a potential landfall along the border between South and North Carolina. Now, I do apologise if there's any slight stuttering today, because we've got very intolerable conditions at HQ with very hot weather. We're not used to it here. But there we are right now. Strat?
Somebody asked about the storm surge. I do have that graphic up, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Somebody asked about the storm surge. The storm surge, I feel like this is an important topic. The storm surge is just not really a big threat with this storm as of now. I mean, storm surge values of only 1 to 3 feet are expected in that yellow zone along the coast, and up to 3 feet at the very most.
Yeah.
Which
I
is
mean, to be fair to the system, though, this is going to be much more dependent on how close it gets exactly to the Florida coastline, or if it makes it, a landfall in eastern Florida. Especially with some of the more toll-style islands, a couple feet of storm surge can still be a pretty significant threat for those regions. But fortunately, at least with the current forecast track, and it is subject to change, of course. We've seen just in the past 36 hours this change from being forecasted to go into the eastern Gulf of Mexico to a good chunk offshore Florida to now very close to the eastern coast of Florida with these tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches. So if you're in more of those very low-lying areas right on the coast and more of those atoll islands, keep an eye out for the storm surge threat if the models and the NHC forecast consensus continue to shift back a bit more to the west and indicate a much closer approach or possible landfall from the system. Storm surge as well in general will definitely be a threat for the Bahamas too. I know we're talking, expecting 3 to 6 for parts of the Bahamas right now in association with this system. So I wouldn't discount it at all. We saw with Hannah when we were live streaming that what a few feet of storm surge can do to some land areas. With some of those more atoll-style islands that are very low-lying in some places. So definitely monitor that threat if you're on a very coastal area.
I saw someone ask a question. So they were asking if this thing can intensify. If it does, if it'll move more east, or if it weakens, it'll move more west.
That's more likely, but
into Florida.
It's not certain that would happen. But it's more likely that a weaker storm would be further west, and a stronger storm would curve further east. Let's see if we can see more radar imagery right now. You can see that band, the very peripheral band of the hurricane, not too far from the coast of Florida. Well, it's getting there slowly, leaving Andros Island right now, and not too far from Bimini. And then it will eventually reach the southeastern tip of Florida. So that might be the first real noticeable change that might tell you that the storm is not too far away.
Yeah, and I think this is a good question to go over as well, just for people that are curious about intensity of system. Someone asked, why did Isaias weaken a bit from last night to this morning, Nathan?
Well, I've not had the best chance to look, but it has been struggling with its organisation, even though you're talking about that eye wall, but it's still dealing with a lot of shear. You can see on the western side and on the southwestern side, there's hardly any convection because it's being blown away, displaced towards the east and northeast where all of that cloud cover is. But as long as it keeps blowing up convection, it's always got a decent chance of sustaining itself, and if it blows more and more, then it should start. Some people were suggesting earlier that it's going to get too strong for the wind shear soon, that it will be able to push it all away, and the wind shear won't affect the storm. I'm not sure that I buy that. I think this one could be struggling with wind shear its whole life.
Yeah, and just another addition onto that, per the NHC forecast discussion, the system did fortunately envelop some dry air from Hispaniola and that harsher mountainous terrain, which did contribute to some of the more disorganization that we saw earlier today, a couple hours ago, although it really is trying to blow up convection solidly over the hard center of the storm at this point in time. So at least that portion might be a bit less of an impact in the near future. But, there's been a lot of talk about the wind shear and impacts. You're right about that. The stronger the system is, the more able it is to generate a larger outflow to kind of push away that shear and minimize the impact. But it's become much more compact, and especially to the north and west, where it'd have to be pushing away to get more of that shear out. That's where the actual cover from the system and its expansion is weakest on the whole northern side. It's much stronger in terms of outflow and cover on the northeastern quadrant. So we probably wouldn't buy that argument fully.
I don't. Some people do, and they may turn out to be right yet. We'll see.
Yeah. Nathan,
Yep.
we have some footage that one of our contributor members has found on Twitter that Wyatt is sharing.
What's this?
From
Play it.
footage of bad flooding from the Dominican Republic.
Oh, wow. That looks pretty bad. It's nearly waist height.
And it's flowing at that point. It's not just standing water.
Wow.
I can imagine this storm would have dumped a lot of rain over Hispaniola.
Yeah,
It looks as though that's the case.
Hispaniola and Puerto Rico saw, heavy amounts of significant rainfall for significant time periods with the system because, a lot of the convection was associated with back when it was a potential tropical cyclone, was displaced to the north of it while we were tracking the main center in the Caribbean Sea. So they were seeing land impacts from the system when it was very large, for even a day or two before the actual core of the system really got to land. So, and even after it relocated center, then the eastern part was flaring up convection from further south of the center, trying to wrap it around. So for Hispaniola, that led to really egregious amounts of rainfall trying to fall over on land.
Indeed, and we look back at the camera there from the Turks and Caicos Islands, looking out somewhere towards the hurricane. Deserted there at the moment. As you can see, the weather's still very inclement. It does appear that it's starting to get a little bit better over there, though.
Yeah, it's pretty gusty out there. I would say, probably good 30, 40 times gusts. So now.
All right. We're here for another 15 minutes if you've got any questions for us and for your peace of mind. But let's just see if we can go back to the National Hurricane Center's key messages, because those are very summary and important. Just clicking that now. So, Isaias will produce heavy rains and potentially life-threatening flash flooding and mudslides across the Dominican Republic, northern Haiti, the Turks and Caicos, and the Bahamas. Heavy rains will begin to affect south and east central Florida late Friday night and the eastern Carolinas by early next week, potentially resulting in isolated flash and urban flooding, especially in low-lying and poorly drained areas. Isolated minor river flooding is possible in the Carolinas early next week. Hurricane conditions and dangerous storm surge are expected in portions of the Bahamas today and Saturday, and hurricane warnings are in effect. Preparations to protect life and property should be rushed to completion. Tropical storm conditions are expected with hurricane conditions possible along portions of the Florida East Coast beginning Saturday, and a tropical storm warning and a hurricane watch are in effect. Storm surge watches or warnings could be needed for part of this area later this afternoon. There is a risk of impacts from winds, heavy rainfall and storm surge beginning late this weekend along the northeastern Florida coast and spreading northward along the remainder of the US East Coast through early next week. Interests along the entire US East Coast should monitor the progress of Isaias and updates to the forecast.
And that fits generally really well with what the National Hurricane Center is expecting for the system. Very well, actually. And that kind of actually feeds into something that someone was asking.
Okay.
Will they declare some sort of state of emergency for parts of the United States, Florida or up to the Carolinas? And the best way to answer that is, if you're in any of those locations, check your local officials for your county to see what they're doing, as well as your, state government as well. But based on what we saw earlier this season so far with Hannah and Douglas, when you see a hurricane watch in place, and it likely get upgraded to a warning even if conditions stay just offshore, because sometimes they like to be a bit more safe than sorry when it comes to this. If the track stays exactly where it is right now or shifts slightly to the west, you really wouldn't be surprised to see a state of emergency or some sort of disaster declaration made in advance to free up funds and resources to help a recovery.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate circumstance that if it gets stronger, you don't want a stronger storm, but it would move to the east, or if it weakens, it would make a full impact in Florida, and neither of those options are absolutely good, right? So it's a really unfortunate circumstance for people that are living in both Bahamas and Florida.
So, lots of people suggesting that the track might shift further west. If it did that, that would obviously bring it into the coast of Florida. What are we thinking? Do we think that's likely to occur looking at the storm right now, or is it fully on track?
Well, the 12Z GFS is coming out right now, and it actually briefly brings it onshore just next to the shore on Florida.
Where's that?
So, the 12Z run that's just coming out right now.
Where exactly along the coast?
Along the central coast of East Florida, briefly.
How strong is it?
In this model run, it brings it there as a 996 millibar system, weakens it due to land interaction and shear as it continues to move generally north-northwest, trying to parallel the coast or either just offshore on the shore, and then it recurves out towards beginning to the north and northeast, although this stops at hour 60 right now, so you don't have anything on this model run yet visible publicly past the latitude of northern Florida for the time being.
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Continue, and the European model is going to come out in a couple hours as well, and that was already a bit further west than the GFS at the 0Z run. If that verifies as well, then we could be looking at a situation where hurricane or tropical storm impacts become significantly more likely along the Florida coastline.
That's unfortunate.
We'd be looking at a landfall, according to that model, somewhere around Vero Beach, I would say.
But given that pressure, it would be a tropical storm.
It would be a moderate tropical storm, yeah.
And I feel at the moment that Isaias weakening to a tropical storm before making landfall or approaching Florida is unlikely, because having been looking at the convection for the last hour or two, it's actually been able to push upstream against the shear and wrap counterclockwise around the centre, which indicates that it can actually lower temporarily.
Yeah, but if it moves further west like that as well, it's going to not be turning as much to the north, and that means it could be facing an increasing amount of shear as it gets very close to the coastline. So, you know, as long as the direction moves more westerly, it's going to be an issue for wind shear impacting the system at least. But, you know, the exact intensity, if it's a strong tropical storm, minimal hurricane, should not be impacting the preparations that people are taking along the eastern Florida coastline to make sure that they're ready for this system in case impacts become much more likely for their exact location. You know, especially if you're already under a tropical storm warning and hurricane watch, you should be rushing preparations to completion, making sure you have your hurricane plan in place, and staying in touch with your local officials for any potential evacuation orders that may be issued, as well as, you know, exact totals and forecasts for your specific residency.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if any of you saw this, but I'm cool.
We've lost you.
I see this right now. Someone saying, thank you for the contribution again. Did the storm track shift more west? Well, compared to the 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. from the National Hurricane Center, it did shift west a bit. Marginally. But we're really going to have to keep a look at these 12Z model runs when they fully come out to see what they're saying. And really, right now at least, if the GFS trend holds with the European model and some of the more storm-specific models like the HWRF, then we should probably be significantly more concerned about more direct impacts to the state of Florida.
Let me read out more of the National Hurricane Center's discussion that they put out at the start of this hour. Isaias is continuing on a steady northwestward motion, northwest at 14 knots. This motion is expected to continue for the next 36 hours or so as the hurricane rounds the southwestern periphery of the Bermuda Azores High. A gradual turn to the north-northwest and then north is expected by 48 to 60 hours due to a break in the ridge developing in response to a central US shortwave trough digging into the southeastern US. And the timing and strength of this trough will determine how far west the storm moves before the hurricane turns northward. So it is a bit of it's a guessing game really, how much it will go there. And from what we've seen in recent years, guys, I mean, I wouldn't be so confident that we'd see that gap happen anytime soon, because so many storms have been pushed further south than what we've been expecting in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex steering
Although
system.
it didn't quite happen with Dorian, I grant, but we were thinking that it would. At first, we were thinking that it would miss the Bahamas to the north, but then the models changed to it hitting Florida via the Bahamas, and then it only did the Bahamas in the end.
It was interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to reiterate that this is a complex steering system that could be determining the exact movement and location of Hurricane Isaias as we move through the upcoming days. Exactly where this upper level trough comes in over the United States is going to be extremely important in determining how close it gets to the coastline, as well as its general intensity as well. So, if the 12Z model runs verify out, they're picking up on this trough, potentially letting the system closer to the coastline than before. If that's the case, then anyone in the tropical storm warning zone and hurricane watch zone needs to make sure that they're preparing today. It's better to prepare today for a potential hurricane close approach than it would be to prepare tomorrow when conditions might start to deteriorate in the near future at that point.
Well, I'll tell you one of the most important parts of forecasting this hurricane right now. 2 words: Gulf Stream. Here's the sea surface temperatures around the world. Sorry, I can't get it zoomed in any more than that, but you can see off the US East Coast, if you squint maybe, that sea surface temperatures are around 28 degrees Celsius at least. I think it might be higher than that. Can't quite tell myself. I think that is 28. Pushing 30 degrees. Yeah, pushing 30 degrees off the coast of South and North Carolina. A very warm Gulf Stream at the moment. A fairly warm area around the Bahamas, a fairly warm Gulf, not relevant in this storm's case, but you can see the whole of the Atlantic is looking pretty warm, and the anomalies will confirm that. All of the oranges here are above average, and you can see just that small sheet of blues, that's below average sea surface temperatures, but that's only by about 1 degree or 2. It's still warm enough to sustain a tropical cyclone like this or stronger. But then you look off the coast of the Carolinas in particular and beyond, the anomaly is quite high, getting up towards a few degrees above average. So this storm, if it's going to hug the coast of the Carolinas towards the Outer Banks, it could have a strengthening phase at that point, even as far as the Outer Banks.
Well, what the NHC has been noting in their discussion is that the sea surface temperatures off the Florida coast are, over the Gulf Stream there, are 30 plus, and they're forecasting a 80 knot, 90 mile an hour peak while it's over those temperatures with current shear. If the shear lowers or the storm develops a structure that allows it to withstand the shear better, which it appears to be trying to do in my opinion, it would have a very good chance of getting to category 2 in the next 24 to 36 hours, but only if the shear abates a bit, which we're not able to forecast very well.
Yeah, we're not sure whether that shear will die down or not. It's one of the more unpredictable parts. I believe we're now joined by Ryan, another Ryan.
Yes.
And you've been watching this storm as well. You were with us yesterday on the stream, and you were talking about hurricane status, weren't you?
Yep, give it 12 hours time, and actually done it in about, I say, 68 hours. 68. It's forecast to become a Cat 2, and then
it was. It's
now
down to 90 miles an hour on the forecast. An earlier one did say Category 2, though, and still wouldn't surprise me.
No, certainly not. Especially, I think it will be at the strongest even once it's past Florida, because the sea surface temperatures are actually just a little bit higher around just off the South and North Carolina coast than off Florida.
As we've just discussed, yeah. So do you feel that it's rebounding in intensity right now, as I think Case said near the start of this hour?
It's possible, but I'm not so sure. I think it'll just sustain. It might strengthen maybe off Florida. It needs to fight that wind shear.
Also got a fully drier air too.
Just passed through the centre.
All right.
And it shows a very tight core.
Interesting.
Rapid change of wind direction at flight level.
A tight core, that can't be good news.
No, it can't, but I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I mean, the wind direction changes from one direction to the other in about 2 barbs on this. So it's a very tight change Minimum flight level pressure they got on this pass, 993 millibars. But that was also with over 20 knot flight level wind, so we're going to have to wait and see what the drop zone says. But it looks like that weakening trend may have stalled out, unfortunately, for the time being, as convection tries to bubble up over the center of the system. And like we've said, it's still going to have some dry air to fight with that it ingested from Hispaniola. It's got to cycle that out, and the rougher amounts of wind shear. But a concerning trend to see develop. I don't think we can really say anything for re-intensification yet, but we do have the recon planes in, which will give us the latest information.
Well, that was an interesting question. People asking Force 13 if Force 13 is a bot. Not really.
Yes.
None of us are, definitely. I think, Strat, you plug in some automated stuff, don't you, on this thing?
Yeah, I throw in some automated things here occasionally, and we do have the automated live stream.
We do.
That's about as robotic as we get. We try to be as human and personable.
We're right
and,
here.
relatable as we can be.
Absolutely. Very short time now before we finish up here, so if you have any more questions, start your message now. What are the chances of a Florida landfall in general? Well, we put that about 40% or so. 30-40%.
It's within the 1.5 cone of uncertainty right now, so any deviation further to the west on this cone forecast from the National Hurricane Center, and the center can pass anywhere in that, and sometimes even out of it too. If it deviates to the west a bit, as the 12Z GFS run is trying to potentially indicate, then you could be looking at a more dangerous situation with a close approach, or even direct landfall from this system. So, again, it's very important to reiterate, if you're in Florida at all in a zone that has a tropical storm warning or hurricane watch in place, make sure you're spending today preparing. If you're at work right now, you'll have some time later this afternoon once you get out of work, or any other obligations you have to get your preparations done. But they should be done by tomorrow morning, when the storm should be getting closer to the coastline potentially. You see the cone there on the left side. By Saturday evening, they'll be making a very close approach to the southeastern Florida coast at this time.
Well, that answers one of the questions there. Best to prepare today then, and definitely finish by tomorrow. What are the chances of rapid intensification?
I think slim.
Yeah, I'm saying pretty slim, because you have the trough digging down, and then that trough, as well as the motion of the storm, is going to cause some wind shear. So no rapid intensification as of now. Maybe some slight gradual intensification for now, and maybe more gradual for a little bit once it gets just north of the shear. But then it gets into cooler waters. So
rapid fire now. Is the southeast at high threat?
It depends on what you're saying when you say
It
the
is a bit.
southeast. North of Florida, the potential is definitely there for a more significant storm impact now. But at least for Florida, it's definitely a more significant threat. You have a tropical storm warning and hurricane watch in place right now.
The waves off the coast of Africa, is that Josephine on the way?
Certainly in the next few weeks, I feel we'll see another storm form from at least one of these waves.
It could be out of that middle one. GFS has been calling for it for a while.
NHC's marked it now.
NHC have marked it. We'll see. The one near the African coast, no. Not seeing it.
No,
yeah,
it's no bit away.
time's up for that one, I think, at this point.
And time's up for us as well.
Really?
Yes, already. We're only here for an hour at this point. I'll just take one or two more here. Which area will get the worst hit? That's a really good question. I can't answer it, I'm sorry. At the moment, it looks like it might be some of the Bahamas, but if it does decide to intensify further, then it could be the Carolinas. Probably not Florida, but there could still be hurricane conditions there.
Yeah, and a landfall isn't truly ruled out, as tracks have shifted it a little bit more west.
Should local governments in the northeast consider informing the public, or is that too early? They
I'm
sort of are, aren't they?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything specifically, from my local officials yet, but I haven't actively looked for that today. But local news stations are covering this, and we are in the 4 to 5 day cone right now up here in the Northeast in general. So I'm pretty sure that they are. And as we get to the end of the weekend and potential impacts for the north become more clear, that you'll see much more information coming in, and you'll be able to stay even more informed from your local officials as well.
Thanks everyone for taking part during this morning's live stream. We'll be back with more coverage later tonight in the evening hours local time on the US East Coast. In the meantime, you can follow our 24/7 live stream, youtube.com/force13/live. Until then, keep yourselves posted on this as it's a developing situation. And there it is, still bubbling up with that convection. 75 miles an hour makes Isaias a Category 1 hurricane at this point, and it could reach Category 2 in the next few days. Have a good day,
Stay safe.
and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Stay safe.
Goodbye.
Take care.
Goodbye.